Yeah, so Stephen, hi. We already started speaking about the past conferences because you're a long-time member of the network, and I was asking you, to recall the past ones and to maybe make a comparison with the one we're attending here at Olomouc in Czech Republic 2024. And what do you think about it? How do you find it?
Yeah, my first conference was 2010. Actually, Ian invited me... Copenhagen. Ian invited me to Leeds, but at the time there was an illness in the family and I couldn't go. And so I laboured on my own and worked on the screenwriting book in Australia without contact with the network. And then Eva had seen the book and published by Wallflower Press, and she invited me to be the keynote at Copenhagen. And that's where I wrote up a keynote, some attitudes and trajectories in screenwriting research. And that's been quite an important paper because some people have used it to map out the different strands of screenwriting research. But it's a network.
That's also the year when we've met. I mean, this was also my first conference attendance in Copenhagen, and I remember we met there in the same rainy weather like we have here in Prague, in the Czech Republic right now. And for me, you were my first meeting, and it stayed like this. I mean, for me, you are a pillar of this network.
Thank you.
No,
thank you.
That's my feeling.
For me, that idea that it's a network that looks at the history, the theory, and the practice was really important. And I think the first generation of the network, the founding members, really understood the need to look at it from different perspectives. And we all understood that it was very hard to get published. And so we came together to nurture our intellectual spirits. And so the SRN has been very important because to research screenwriting, you have to be a little bit crazy. You have to imagine performances in your mind, you have to think about institutional conditions, you have to think about practices and theories, and it draws unusual people to it. And I find that those people are quite interesting and eccentric sometimes. Exotic even, and they don't have a home in their own places. They're kind of exceptional people. Like JJ and Catherine Millett and others, and Adam Gantz and others. But you couldn't organise that. It has to be a network. It's a loose category. And I think originally we thought that screenwriting research, it was a space, for me, I worry that it needs to stay about screenwriting research. It's not a network for dramaturgy. It's not a network for creative practice research. It's not a network for narratology. It's not a network for how to write a screenwriting. They all have their places. But nowhere else can you come and say, I'm doing screenwriting research, and find people who can understand what you're saying and help you along the way. So I think, but screenwriting research is fleeting. So I'm quite protective of the idea that, no, we're not here just to write successful screenplays, and we're not here just to study screenplays. Actually, screenwriting and the screenplay is something I question. I actually appreciate non-page-based screenwriting. And I think if anything, what's happened is, at the time when it started, it was a little bit on the outside, but because of Netflix and the streaming industry, now everyone's a storyteller, everyone's a showrunner, everyone wants to be involved in this story phenomenon. And
I will interrupt you here because I just want to make a point of what you've said before, and I think, and I'm assuming what I'm saying right now, and don't be modest. I will say like this: I think that, of course, it's Ian MacDonald with his holistic concept of the screen idea, which is behind of the network, and it's you with another holistic concept which you have in your seminal work in screenwriting history, theory, and practice. And I think you are allowed to say what you've said before. Even some people who might hear us today talking about this might feel offended, but I think you're right. And I think we have to protect this, because otherwise it will go in another discourse about how to write good scripts or how to teach writing good scripts, and this is endless.
It's very tempting, and I hear it a lot. Our job, for me, the main work is not to say this is a good script or a bad script, or this is good writing or bad writing. For me, it's to explore the conditions of the writing and the writer, and to look at the conditions of the culture and how writing travels and is received by audiences and creators. So it's the text, it's the production context, it's the system in Ian's sense. And I think if we just focus on the script as a commodity, as a page-based commodity, well, we've lost that connection to writing. And for me, the concept of scripting was powerful because it reminded us this is about writing. This is not about just creating a screenplay or formatting a page. There's lots of screenwriting that has nothing to do with the page.
I think your European origins play a role in this, because I noticed this also in your book. And the fact that you're making this bridge over the ocean, I think it's very important. Because otherwise, I've been attending your paper presentation of today, and I found very interesting that the whole thing you build on the doxa, the term you took from Ian MacDonald, and the fact that we are not done with the doxa. As we spoke before, we will never be done with the doxa. This will continue, and we will have to face this, I think.
Yeah, and what does being done with the doxa mean? I mean, I think we need to continually make space for the different languages of the network, the different countries that come into the network. I want to hear more. One of the things I really appreciate is hearing from Brazilian screenwriters. That's something I've learned in the last few years a lot more about, and some of my works started to be published there. I, of course, appreciate the Romanian context. I am aware of the Balkan context. We had a great keynote in Potsdam, who was great, Macedonian director. So it's great that every time we go to a new city, we get a little bit of the flavour of that screenwriting culture. But it does worry me if we just turn to industry as the voice, the guiding voice. It has to remain an intellectual endeavour. It has to be a conceptual practice, not just how to write something that will be sold or bought, or that's important to me. And there's a lot at stake in this, because I think if we see ourselves as custodians of screen stories, well, we need to find new languages and ways to talk about them, and that's important, to find new discourses, new possibilities, new avenues. And that's why I appreciate working with so many scholars from around the world, because you can't do it on your own. No one's head is that big.
Look, Stephen, thank you so much for everything. And I have a bunch of other questions, but I think we've covered more or less everything. Because we're doing this talk also to give a new face to a project that the network started a while ago, which is called Conversations. What they're trying to do is trying to document the history of what has been done so far in those conferences, which is a bit difficult. We're waiting also Paolo Russo, who will be entering soon, and talk with the two of us. But so far, there have been some Zoom conversations, and we are starting right now the live discussions we do on video with participants. So is there any suggestion, any idea about the future conferences? I mean, what's your opinion on this?
I think that the papers need to be really carefully examined and reviewed. I mean, when, for instance, Ian and I started collaborating on the book series, Ian was worried that we were too young as an area for a book series, that it would be too much of a stress. And it's true that a lot of the colleagues, not all of them, but a lot of them are new to book writing, and they need a lot of mentoring and so on. And I think still, I often walk away a little bit unsatisfied with some of the papers. I want to see more attention to the quality of the work. And I think Paolo Russo has said the same in different conferences. And that also means really thinking about the keynotes and helping us push the boundaries of where we should be and making us a little bit uncomfortable. It's a very welcoming place, but we have to stay uncomfortable and continue to evolve, or otherwise it'll be just stagnate. And I think that's the approach of reinvention and continually find new voices as well. So I think we need to find some really exciting new voices, encourage them. Hopefully they'll, come up through the journal and also to some extent the book publishing.
Stay uncomfortable. I like this slogan. And my last question to you is, because I've been to your presentation, and I assume this is part of your new book or new work you're doing, new research you're doing right now. So what's up next to you, Professor Marius? What's next?
Well, I guess I'm reacting. When I first wrote the screenwriting book, I felt as though my job was done. So in some ways I felt I had nothing more to say. And then the Ethics in Screenwriting project began. And that was, suddenly I realized I had something to say. And that is really about relational ethics. It's about how do stories emerge in between relationships and how do writers act within those relationships. And then when I did that project, I thought, well, this is carried over to something else. This has gone into, I'm now thinking about the screenwriter as a kind of cultural mediator, that they're an important reteller of stories, an important channel for the culture. And so I've become interested in this kind of idea of cultural mediation. And if you look at Bourdieu, we're not the only cultural mediators. Advertising people are also cultural mediators, film reviewers, critics, different writers. So where I'm interested now is, so what happens when we start to talk beyond the network to other areas of creative endeavour? We need to start having conversations with the film reviewers, with the broader scholars around us, and not just create a very insular discussion about three-act structure. We can beat McKee to death forever, but that's not a living intellectual endeavour. And there are still key questions to be asked about different cultures. We still don't have enough scholarship on Asian storytelling, African. Yeah. There's a little bit coming through on India. I think we're just beginning the journey of understanding the global heritage of screen, and this accounts for our relationship with the Romanian screenwriting scholarship also.
So in a way, this is answering to my previous question, if we're still relevant. In a way, you say the road just begins, and in a way, to my, let's say, background cynical thought, you're saying, no, we still have a lot to do, and we still have a lot to do.
Yeah, I think there's still a lot to do. And this is one of the reasons why one of the papers that I wrote two other papers inspired by the network. The network's been very important in inspiring work. One was, why are there so many Australians here? One question was, why are there so many Australians here? So I wrote a very long paper on the prehistory of screenwriting studies in Australia before the network. And that's a story of very rich interactions between filmmakers and critics. And we were asking questions about different ways of making films, different ways of writing, different ways of using mise-en-scène. Figures such as Adrian Martin in Australia, and also Catherine Millard and others. So they were incredibly important we were already exploring diverse ways of telling stories. And because we're a multicultural society, that's very important. So I wanted to explain in that paper in the Journal of Screenwriting why there were so many Australians at the conference. That was my way of answering my question. The other paper that became important to me is the question of universality. I kept on hearing this word of storytelling is universal, the rules are universal, the rules apply universally, and it's just a term really have problems with. So I wrote a paper that questioned the universality of screenwriting, and I wanted to make room for diversity, for plurality. That's what scripting was all about. There's not one way to write, there's many ways to write. And if we think there's only one way to write a good script or whatever, we're not doing our jobs.
Stephen, I was thinking earlier that first of all, we missed you in Bucharest when we launched your book in Romanian. And second, that I'm not sure I have given you my introduction to your book in Romanian. So I will translate it and give it to you, because I will repeat right now what I was saying there, that meeting you 14 years ago for me was a big chance, because it, in a way, I made peace again with me being a professor, and I thank you very much. It's always an intellectual pleasure to meet you, Stephen. Thank you so much.
Thanks.